21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
The 5 marketing mistakes that we see commonly made by entrepreneurs. It starts with people that aren't communicating to the right part of the brain. And so this goes on to Simon Sinek's 3 golden circles. And there's a tendency for people to communicate to the neurocortex, but the neurocortex is not responsible for decision making. The limbic brain is responsible for decision making and emotions. So we need to figure out how to activate the limbic brain. Mistake number 1, talking to the wrong part of the brain. Mistake number 2 is that people think sales and growth is a result of new business, and often forget that there's an entire revenue model that can be optimized, that every single business runs on top of. And there's 7 key variables that you can adjust, not just new business. The third one is that people talk about themselves too much, and they forget that the hero in the story is the customer, and no one cares about them. And not to be crass, but no one actually cares about you as a business owner or as a business, period. They care about 2 things only: solving their problems and accomplishing their goals. So we need to then cater to that. Once we understand who our customer is and their problems, we're able to then demonstrate trust without saying trust us. Mistake number 4 is that usually people don't have a goal or a business outcome in mind when starting marketing. So they think it's about impressions and social media posting versus actually trying to accomplish a business outcome. And mistake number 5 is, more often than not, people don't have any benchmarks. So they don't understand if they're performing better or worse than peers in their industry. And so we help people solve those 5. We started the business in 2007, and we've been in marketing and advertising for better part of 20 years. And our customers have always said, how do I know it's going to work? How do I know it's worth paying you? Why should I stay? So 17 years of pressure from customers to make sure we're delivering value got us to a spot where our brand promise is results first. We're always there for you. And if we do what we say, or you don't pay. And it's really a selfish orientation around wanting to keep customers so that we can maintain a healthy level of revenue and grow our company. But the only way we keep them is if we make them money. And so after 17 years of sharpening our sword, and you know what they say, pressure creates diamonds, we've come up with a process that makes it so that people can predictably have an outcome within 95% accuracy, and we won't take on the business unless we know we can win.
Are you ready for this? Are you ready? Are you ready for this?
The first mistake people make, like we mentioned, is the idea that they talk to the wrong part of the brain. So typically you see information on websites like, this is what we do and how we do it differently. Let's say you take a landscape service company or construction business, and they say, we do full service landscape design, build, construction. We have a great team with dozens of years or 50 years experience with the best equipment, hire us. It doesn't inspire decision making. And if I'm looking at you versus somebody else, and you both have a 4.3 star rating on Google reviews with 50 reviews each, and you both say you're full service design, build, construction, how can I tell who to pick? What does it come down to? Well, it comes down to price. And that's a shitty race to be a part of. So we need to figure out how to start finding people that believe what we believe. We take an example of an entrepreneur over in Tacoma, Washington in the States. They do full service design, build, construction, but they have a purpose. And Simon Sinek talks about how the leaders that drove the most loyalty, the most inspired leaders in history, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, you name it, Elon, whatever, they have a higher reason for being around and what they're trying to accomplish. And then people follow that, not for them as a leader, but for themselves. So, Martin Luther King, I have a dream, and people follow because they had that same dream, not because they liked his dream. They had the same dream. So how do we do that in a business setting? Well, with these guys in Tacoma, as an example, they want to end the epidemic of screen time for kids and get family outside. And so they engage the five senses by building landscape design construction um, spaces. As an example, would be like blueberry bushes next to a pool, so kids can like munch while they're outside and having fun. So their whole thing is about bringing the five senses to life and getting children into nature. If you have kids and a boring backyard and your kids are on screen, that resonates more than full service design build. So that's one example of how you can use Simon Sinek's three golden circles to turn yourself from being what you do into why you do it. And there's a series of 4 questions we give people to start thinking this way. And it's really simple. And there's only one rule: you're not allowed to wordsmith. No wordsmithing allowed. The first question is, what do you do? Just simply put, what do you do? And then you ask yourself, well, how do you do it differently than the competitors that you know of? And differently means in a way that's tangible that a customer would experience. So if you say you have good communication, just be specific. Like, we text you when we show up and we text you a picture when we leave. That's an example of good communication that a customer would experience. The third question is, why do you do it that way? And the fourth question is, why is that important to you? The fourth question is usually difficult. The third question is usually answered with because it makes money, and you're not allowed to answer that way. So you have to think about why you do it that way, because you could run a business any way you want. And then the fourth one is, why is that important to you as the entrepreneur, as a founder? And that last one is usually difficult for people to become clear with, because you're accessing your limbic brain in an emotional state. But that series of 4 questions can help start to put you into an authentic position that's based on something you believe. Because the whole idea that Simon Sinek talks about is, you're not meant to sell to the entire market. You want to sell to people that believe what you believe.
I run the place, I run the space, I run the scene that light up the face. I run the place, I run the space, I run the scene. Run the place, run the space, I run the scene that light up your face. I run the place, I run the space, I run the scene.
Mistake number 2, people think that growth comes from new business, and often forget that there's a revenue model that can be optimized. Essentially, every single business runs on the same revenue model with some slight variations, but it's simple. You talk about leads, so these are the people you're actively talking to that want to do business with you, times conversion rate, how many of them turn into customers as a percentage, gives you customers. Customers times average sale times gross margin percentage gives you your average gross margin in dollars. From there, you look at how many times they buy from you in a year and how many years they stay with you the lifetime of their relationship. In that model, there are 6 variables that we can tweak. And so as a marketing company, people often think that we're all about generating leads, but sometimes people have enough leads, they're just not good ones, or they have enough leads, but they're not picking up their phone, or they have enough leads, but they're not sales trained, so they're not talking about budget or whatever. Sometimes they're priced too low and the average sale needs to come up. Maybe their gross margin's too low, so they're actually running their business into the ground. Sometimes it's easy to just ask somebody, would you like fries with that? How can you get someone to buy from you more than once? So on and so forth. So we look at the revenue model and say, okay, where can we tweak it to make it better for you? And what's interesting is if you tweak each of those by 10%. So let's say you have 10 leads and your conversion rate's 30%. So 3 out of 10 leads turn into a customer. When I say increasing it by 10%, I mean you go from 10 to 11 leads. What can you do to get more leads? Well, you could hire someone like us. You could put in a referral program. You could put signs up where you do your work, whatever. You can get more leads, but we're talking about 10%, just one more out of 10. And then your conversion rate, and this is actually fascinating and something that I think needs to be maybe repeated a few times. What is the lifeblood of every single company and organization? The lifeblood of every single company and organization is sales. Without sales, there's no operations. Without sales, there's no finance. Without sales, there's no HR. So sales is first. And everybody is typically trained in their field of expertise. So they get trained on how to do the work. But in rooms of hundreds of people, and I've asked tens of thousands of people, how many of you have been formally sales trained? And it's 1 in 100, if not less. So how can you increase your conversion rate? Well, take some sales training for the love of God. It's the most important part of business. Please go enroll in the professional sales training. And Sandler training is something that we recommend and we live by. If you've never heard of Sandler sales or Sandler training, I'd check it out. So then we got to look at, okay, we got to increase our price and our average sale. There's two ways to increase your price. One is don't take jobs that are low. So raise the floor of the jobs you're willing to do. The second one is actually just increase your price. And you should be increasing your price every year. Gross margin can come from efficiencies. So maybe you buy some equipment, it's capital expenditure, doesn't hit your profit and loss. And now you can start doing the work of two people with one person, as an example. Frequency of purchase and then lifetime value. So, I mean, doing things like customer service, upserves, what can we do to add to the business? There's different businesses have different types of ways to add another purchase. Could be smaller, but another purchase through the year. And lifetime value of a customer, you can lengthen with NPS, customer surveys, email newsletters. There's a ton of things you can do to extend the life of a customer. But if you start looking at your revenue model with those 6 variables, then it's a lot easier. And if you increase each one by 10%, it's an 83% net increase. And so what we say is we'll pick one, focus on it for a quarter, and then pick another one, focus on it for a quarter. And so in 6 quarters or a year and a half, you'll have increased your gross margin contribution to your overhead by 83% without having to, change the way you do business.
Are you ready for this? Are you ready? Are you ready for this? Dance all day and even all night. Yo, dance all day and even all night. Dance all day and even all night. Yo, dance all day and even all night.
Mistake number 3, people talk about themselves and no one cares. So we have to acknowledge the fact that a customer only cares about 2 things: solving their problems and accomplishing their goals. Those are the 2 things they care about, and that's the only thing that matter. So we have to demonstrate that we can do that. Well, demonstrating that you can do that, you can't just say it. If I say to you, trust me, that usually elicits goosebumps and sleazy salespeople in our heads. So I can't say trust me. I have to demonstrate. Well, how do I demonstrate trust? I'll trust you when you're like me. And this happens, and you've been traveled, Martin. When you meet somebody from where you're from, as you travel the world, an instant amount of trust is created just because you're from the same geography. They could be a liar and a sleazebag, and they could rob people, and they could be a criminal. But because they grew up where you grew up, there's trust because they're like you. You are my friend when you walk in my moccasins. And so how do we go about showing people that we're like them? Well, the best way to do it is by niching. And there's a saying, the riches are in the niches. When we niche and pick a customer type or a solution or project type, we then become really good and experts at said problem solving for customer or said problem solving for solution. There are 2 ways to niche, broadly speaking. One way is horizontally and scaling up. Vern Harnish's crew does a really good job explaining. I'm going to steal the example and R&D, rip off and duplicate just for the sake of people understanding it. And there's vertical positioning, vertical versus horizontal. So horizontal is industry agnostic. It's a solution that can be good for any industry. In the example they have in their book, it's big ass fans. You might have seen these fans. They're giant. They have yellow tips on the side of it. They cool big spaces. Whether you have an arena or an airport or a warehouse, they can cool big spaces. So they're industry agnostic. They have a horizontal position in the marketplace. Intrigue is vertically positioned. We go after landscape entrepreneurs and landscape manufacturers. And so we're in the vertical of landscaping as an industry. What does that do for us? Well, it makes us really good at it because we do it again and again and again and again and again and again. So not only are we good at it, we understand the problems of the customers better than they do because we speak to hundreds of landscapers a year. And they're only themselves. Maybe they have a peer group, they have 12, 15 others, but we're talking to hundreds, and we see the problems from all over the world and have solutions to help them. So then I can start to ask them questions about their pain points. One of the biggest pain points for landscape entrepreneurs is the fact that they have seasonality in demand. So it's crickets, and then it's insane. And when it's insane, they're too busy to even answer the phone. It's really difficult. So they like to have it, a bit more flat and even throughout the year. A lot of times they get shitty calls too, so they don't screen their calls well, and people ask them to build them, like a sandbox, but they're actually trying to do $150,000 construction jobs. So they're talking to the wrong people. And then a lot of times they say things like they can't hire any staff, so there's no good people out there, which is a bunch of malarkey. But that's the problem that they think they have. Then there's technology. How do you handle the technology? There's so many choices: AI, technology, software, CRMs, ERPs, you name it. It's difficult as a landscaper to make decisions on how they should invest in a tech stack. So we understand all this stuff better than they do because we talk to hundreds of people. And that's what they can do as well in niche. And you can niche as a landscape entrepreneur. This is speaking to like a construction service business more than others, but it still applies. You can niche based on a customer type or based on a project solution. So you could become the retaining wall king and build retaining walls for everybody and be the best at retaining walls. And you become really efficient at it and highly profitable. And you'll be sought out to build retaining walls and complex retaining walls. Or maybe you go after a specific type of customer. So maybe you like to do rural estate homes, or maybe you like to do downtown tiny spaces. But when someone finds you and they're from downtown or from a rural place, and they see on your website that you're a rural or downtown specific expert versus full service design build, you have pricing power and you become the choice, not a choice. And because you're doing the same thing again and again, you understand the customer again and again. So now you can make your entire website about the customer, the problems they have, and the solutions you give them, and then show them a bunch of testimonials from a bunch of people that you've done the work for. So that's long story short on the mistake number 3, which is talking about yourself too much, not about the customer. We want to go from being organizationally centric and solution focused to being customer centric and problem focused. And so we help people make that transition. No goal. So I'm Canadian, right? So there's a referee, no goal. So this often happens though. You have a person that's a leader of a company. They either hire a marketing coordinator, someone gets designated to be the marketer. They already do something else, or they hire a marketing company, and they say things like, "We need to post more on social media. We need a new website. We need to email customers more." But it's often really overlooked and extremely simple that we need to figure out what the goal should be for marketing. And marketing is really one of two things depending on your business. It's either capturing demand that exists in the marketplace, so you want to get the demand that exists, or it's generating demand that doesn't exist and doing so in a bit of a different manner. So they have different methods, but we have to decide, are we doing one or the other or both? If the idea is to capture demand or generate demand, the outcome is still a meeting booked or an inquiry. So we got to figure out, well, the goal needs to be something about talking to customers or potential customers. And so we look at it really simple. It's either cost per lead. So you get an inquiry, what's the cost per lead? Or it could be cost per qualified lead. So you can actually get more scrutinous and say, okay, you know what? We had 5 leads, 1 was good. So the 1 is how much it cost. So cost per qualified lead, or even better, customer acquisition cost. How much does it take for us to buy a customer? Now, there are some economics to marketing that are true across the board, and I'm going to just break it down quickly. But essentially, long story short, the higher the value of the customer, the more it costs to get them. That's just straight up. So if you have a $100,000 project you want to get done, it's going to cost X. If you have a $20,000 project, it's going to cost Y, and Y is going to be less. Now, if we want to figure out what our budget should be, we need to reverse engineer based on how many customers we need. So if we say something like, we need 50 new customers this year at an average of $100,000 a piece, so $5 million in revenue, then we need to understand our revenue model from before. So we got 50 new customers at 100K. Well, let's assume, just for the sake of math and simplicity, that we have a 50% conversion rate. Well, that means I need 100 leads to get 50 customers. And actually, it's probably more like a 20% conversion rate. So why don't we be a bit more realistic and say, okay, we need 250 leads to get 50 customers. Well, if we need 250 leads, I need to know how much it costs to generate a lead. Now, if you're doing $100,000 construction projects, typically a lead's going to be around $300 and $400, between $300 and $400 for a lead. Whether they're good or not, debatable. But you're talking about $1,200, $1,300 for a qualified lead. But let's just say, for the sake of simplicity, we're looking at $300 per lead, and we need 250 of them. Now, the only way you know about the cost per lead is if you start measuring it. So you might not know what it is today, but if you start measuring it, you'll know better next year, and you'll know better the year after that. Now, we've done this for many years, so we understand what it costs because we do it for a bunch of people, hundreds of customers. But let's say it's $300 to get a lead, and we need 250 of them. That's $75,000. So $75,000 is going to get you 50 customers in that scenario. That's actually unrealistic, but this still gives you the easy math. So now we've got a good idea of what we need to do in terms of spend. Now we have to do it right, and that's what the other mistakes are. So that $300 cost per lead is based on somebody being authentically positioned with speaking to the limbic brain, bit of emotion tied to it. They've optimized the revenue model, so they understand their pricing model better, and they're talking about the customer, not about themselves. Because if you don't do those three things, your cost per lead goes way up. Because if you do all these things and you don't do it well, not to mention the fact that you need to have a solid marketer, running Google ads with a great website that's designed for conversion. Those are all things that come along with it. And I can only explain these assumptions based on working with us, right? So if you're working with somebody else, the economics go a bit wonky. Maybe they're better, but for the most part, this is what I'm just referencing our business. But now you've got a good idea of your goal. Okay, so I need 250 leads, cost me $300 for lead. My budget's 75K. My outcome is going to be 50 new customers, or that's what I'm hoping for. 250 leads, 50 new customers. Let's go run. That's the scientific method. Here's my hypothesis to start. $300 cost per lead. I need 250, $75,000. Let's run the experiment for the season or the year, and then make a conclusion based on what we found out. And then there's also another great saying, the OODA loop. This is done by fighter pilots. So it's observe, orient, decide, act. Observe, what does the business need? What's going on with the marketplace? Orient yourself as you start to do everything, decide what you want to do, act on it. And then next year, the OODA loop gets tighter because you've learned, because you're measuring all this from year to year. Maybe you end up at a $500 cost per lead, but a 10% conversion rate. Okay, well, let's plan for it next year. And how can we make it better? No one measures this stuff. And that's the mistake. So you need to have a goal, and it needs to be measured. And it's just those age-old adage of, you have to inspect what you expect, and what you measure can be done. So there's just a lot of people just not even come close to this, and too many people asking for social media posting and how to use TikTok videos, which is just insane. Number 5, no benchmarks. So you're doing your marketing, you've got your goal figured out, you got your cost per lead, and things are good or things are bad, but we don't know how well we're performing relative to the industry. So one of the things, we do a talk with this subject, and we always say at the beginning of the talk, at the end of this talk, my goal is to make it so that you can hold people to a higher standard. You can hold people accountable to a higher standard when it comes to marketing. You follow these 5 mistakes/tips to fix the mistakes. And so no industry benchmarks is a difficult mistake to fix unless you find a good marketing partner, or you have a really good marketing person. A lot of people forget that marketing is about the market. It's not about just you. So we need to understand how well we're doing relative to other people, because if we're doing well for our business, but we're underperforming the market, we've got massive room for improvement. So if an industry is growing at 20% and you're growing at 10%, well, you're underperforming the industry. But if you don't know even the growth rate of your industry, you don't know how well you are doing. And that relates then to marketing. So a couple of things people don't understand when it comes to websites. A website built properly with the right mechanisms of bringing good quality people to it, not traffic and impressions, people. This is another thing people talk about. We've got traffic and hits and impressions. Well, what you really want on your website is people. And so sometimes people forget that that's what we're doing here. A website done right, bringing the right people to it, will convert 3 out of 100 visitors. Meaning, when 100 people come to your website, you'll hear from 3 of them. They'll either fill out a form, download something, or call you. If your website isn't 3% converting or better, you've got a shit website, or you're not bringing the right people to it, or a combination of the two. But a lot of people don't know that. And so that the point is, okay, we'll go ask your marketing person, what is your conversion rate? Because they probably don't even know right now. And then that's across industry. That's not even in an industry standard. That's just across, 3% is decent. Our sites usually convert somewhere between 5 and 7%. But not all of them do. Some of them are under 3. I could show you a list, but I don't have it on the screen right now. But I think right now out of 110 or 120 websites, we have 4 or 5 customers under 3% conversion rate. But they're red, they're flagged, we're working on them. So the other thing is cost per lead. And this is something you can bring up in your peer groups, which I also recommend. It's not part of the 5 marketing mistakes, but as entrepreneurs, it's lonely at the top. Peer groups are amazing, whether it's EO, YPO, or an industry peer group. That's a great place to learn what other people are doing well and what people are doing wrong, and share what's working and what's not. Again, in landscaping, the industry is actually quite open. People share a lot, more so than other industries. So, and there's a lot of opportunities for peer groups. So get in one, start measuring your cost per lead and see what it looks like next to other people. We know that in 2024, for a $100,000 construction job, you're looking at somewhere between $300 and $400 for a lead, and somewhere between $1,200 and $1,500 for a qualified lead. So if you're ready to pay $1,500 to get a good quality lead, and let's say you're, converting those at 20% out of the qualified leads, right? Not just leads, but qualified leads. That means, let's say on $1,500, you got to pay $7,500 to get a job worth $100K. And that's usually on a gross margin of 35,000 or 35% ish. So you're making 35 grand gross margin on a $7,500 investment. If you understand that's what you're doing and you're willing to do it, you can do it all day long. But you need to know your benchmarks and you need to understand your numbers. But once you fix all those mistakes, measuring what you want to accomplish, and then comparing with other people in the industry to see if you're above or below average, you can get a really good sense on how to outpace your peers, actually. Because at the end of the day, we want to be leaders in the industry we're in, for the most part. And if you don't, go say la vie, no problem. But that's typically who we work with. For all the landscapers listening, you can check us out on your podcast place of choice, the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast. Entrepreneurs, if you want to speak to us about helping you the way we just talked about, we're happy to talk, but we would prefer if you're in the service and construction business. Because if you're not, or a lawyer, if you're a lawyer, we're in. Otherwise, we probably won't speak to you because we stick to our niche. And if you did want to speak to us, I would you go to our website, How We Help. There's a marketing action plan. So we essentially charge $3,500 out of the gate to do an audit. It takes about 3 days. Come back with a plan based on your business. If you're in landscaping, we can do it in 2 days. And it's $3,500 up front. If you I don't know if there's an offer. If you don't like the audit, you don't think it's worth 10 grand, we'll give you your money back. But No one ever takes us up on that. But yeah, just go to intrigueme.ca or Google Intrigue Media. How we help. Look at the marketing action plan. $3,500 to start. Takes 3 days. We can show you what it'll look like for 12 months investment. Talk about budget, what you want to do with your business. But please, service, construction, and legal. Otherwise, happy to talk, but we're probably not the best fit at this point.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskarik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.